All right, we're going to get started. I'm Dave, and we're here with Lou, and we're going to talk today about central stations and how to decide what makes sense for you, what makes sense for your company and your customers. So, to give a little bit of background on Lou, Lou has been in the industry long enough to know central stations better than most of the people running them. He's worked for quite a few, he's worked with quite a few, and Lou has been my go-to when it comes to alarm regulation, when it comes to central stations. I've had quite a few of my clients come to me and say, we're looking for a new monitoring center, what do we do? And I give them Lou's phone number. So what I was hoping we could do, if it's okay with you, is just kind of jump right in and get right into, we'll start with the topic of I need a monitoring center. What do I do? So, Lou, if it's okay with you, do you mind if I jump right into some of the questions that we get?
Dave, my pleasure. I'd be glad to answer if I can anything you throw at me.
All right. So, I'm going to start with some of the basics. So, I've seen people say, we're not a central station, we're a monitoring center. Is there a difference? Is there such a thing as a difference?
No, Dave. I mean, the old term was central station. It came from the old telephone days when there was a central station and direct wires going out. Then became a monitoring center. Today, we're a call center. Let's be honest.
Okay.
We get calls, we get alarm calls, we make phone calls. Most people today just call a central station a call center.
So looking at it as a call center, and in this day and age, it's not like you said, it's not just as simple as telephone calls coming in. There's a lot more complication. There are quite a few more complications now. So, like if you look at what makes a center station qualified, like what kind of certifications should you be looking for?
Well, it depends on, sometimes it depends on the area of the country. Like if you're in the New York City area, you want to be a FDNY approved central station, but that's really for a region. You want to make sure that the central station or monitoring center is UL listed, number one. Number two, that you want to see if they're HIPAA qualified, if they do, PERS monitoring. Basically it's UL, FM, factory mutual approved. And if you have those two things, you're a UL central station.
So let me ask you this. A lot of the dealers that we work with, they know UL because they're using UL listed equipment. Some of them might be writing UL certificates for the systems they're installing. It's not as common anymore, but some of them are. So let me ask you, what does UL listing of a monitoring center actually mean?
Well, they have standards. I mean, UL came out with a standard. It's 827, which tells what essentials. First of all, the physical condition. Does it have windows? Doesn't have windows? Does it have a sprinkler system? Is it protected? And also, gives you an outline of how the phone lines. Don't forget, a lot of the central stations still use dedicated phone lines. How they are routed into the building, the power requirements of the building. Is there backup generators? Is there backup batteries? So UL wrote the standard back in the day, and it's updated every year or two, every couple of years. And most central stations adhere to UL 827.
So it's mostly about redundancy and security. Is that right?
Correct. Redundancy, security, personnel. Again, depending on like if you're monitoring accounts in Virginia, is your operators compliant to Virginia law? Are they registered?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times the actual dispatcher has to be registered at least in the state that they operate in, but sometimes they have to be operating in all the states that they monitor in.
Is there value to something like a 5-diamond certification, or does that depend on what you're doing?
No, 5-diamond is a very good requirement. It's there is an industry group called SIA, Security Industry Association, and many years ago they came up with a basic outline of how a dispatcher should be trained and the conditions that they operate in. So 5-diamond, means that again somebody else has looked at that company and they gave a stamp of approval.
Would you say 5-diamond is the certification or a certification?
A certification.
Okay, so it's not the only one that's out there.
Correct, it is not. And again, depending, excuse me, Dave, I got a dog here that's whacking me on the side.
So, and as far as, so if it has to do with primarily training, you know, in this day and age, is it fair to say that of the big boys that are out there, the monitoring centers, are they all more or less going to be doing the same thing to train their operators, or is everyone going to have a unique training program?
There's going to be a bit. The basic training is SIA, and then a lot of the companies that I represent and that I work with go far and above what SIA recommends. So five
Okay.
diamond is a good standard, but again, when you're looking for a central station, there's many aspects that you have to look at, and there's many
Okay.
things you have to look at as a checklist and check off.
Okay. So, with quite a few monitoring centers that you and I have dealt with over the years have multiple locations.
Yep.
Can you explain load balancing, redundancy? Like what is true, like what what matters? Like if I have a satellite location, if I'm sharing the load between monitoring centers, what does that mean? Can you explain that?
Well, number one, let's take some of the companies, that I represent and I work with very closely. They have three basic centers. There's one in wherever on the East Coast, one Central, and one West Coast. Number one, they all have to have protected central station, protected doors, protected windows. They have to have battery backup. They have to
Mhm.
have generator backup. But now you're talking about software. So, is the software that they're using totally redundant in all three
Yeah,
of
it's
central
not
stations?
always somebody crash into the side of the building. Sometimes it's a hurricane.
Correct.
Sometimes it's a cyber attack. Sometimes the carrier goes down.
And it has to be that the load balancing has to be consistent. It has to be on the spot. You can't say, okay, I'll shut down the central station on the East Coast and I'll divert everything over to the West Coast. It has to be redundant. The signals
Mhm.
have to come in to the first available operator.
Okay. There was years ago, I remember a central station that used to say if we ever went down, we flip a switch and all the signals go from building A to building B.
Right.
Is
Well, the
that
problem is
is that
where
realistic?
where is the switch?
Yeah.
Is the switch on the other side of the building? So I walk to the other side of the building and flip a switch. That's not good. It has to be
Well,
totally.
realistically, when I think about something like that, does that mean that there's a building somewhere, 1,000 miles away, staffed with operators who are just sitting there twiddling their thumbs and looking out the window, waiting for work to do? Or should a central station reasonably be monitoring signals in both places? And now, Station A goes down, Central Station B just takes more alarms.
Well, that's the key question is when you go to visit your central station of choice. And that, by the way, I definitely recommend a visit. I would hate to see people, pick a central station out of a book like a catalog, the Sears and Roebuck catalog. But you have to make sure that the load sharing is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week,
Okay.
consistent. In other words, it can't be, I'll flick the switch. So operator A is available in California, gets the alarm. The next alarm, maybe that operator or operators are not available, and that alarm goes to, where New York or wherever.
So you
First
brought up an
available.
interesting point. Should you tour a central station, and if so, what are you looking for?
No, I always say, would you buy a car without trying it? The answer is no.
Okay.
If at all possible, I definitely recommend visiting the central station, looking
Should
at
you
the
worry if a
facility,
central
looking at the
station?
cleanliness, looking how the operators handle alarms, looking at the generators. I mean, you may not
Okay.
know what you're looking at, but at least you'll have an idea that this is a real company and they're doing a real job.
And you want the person giving you a tour to actually know what they're talking about, because
I
even
would
if they're
sure
not
hope
taking the
so.
alarms, you hope they know what they're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of central stations do not allow visitors on the actual dispatch floor. But again,
Okay.
you want to see it, you want to feel it. Again, I say you wouldn't buy a car without test driving it.
It's interesting. Are there monitoring centers that, I mean, I would assume they would want, they want to have a showcase. Should you worry if a monitoring center doesn't allow a tour?
I would definitely worry about that one, Dave.
I
Would
mean,
you?
I've been to monitoring centers where the closest you can get is you look through a glass wall and you see blinking lights and people look busy. I've been to other monitoring centers where they walk you right onto the floor and you're walking in between operators taking alarms.
Mhm.
And I wonder, yeah, I think that's really cool to be able to get that close and personal with the activity. But is my being there, is some other company being there, am I distracting an operator from taking alarms?
I sure hope not, but again, as I said, it depends on the central station, on their internal policies or their policies. Um, I I've been to the central stations where you can't go on the floor, and I've
Mhm.
been to central stations where you can sit and talk to an operator, they'll actually work in tandem with you to show
Okay.
you how they handle alarms. It's the policy, but please, if you're talking to a prospective dealer, prospective customer, have them visit the central station whenever possible.
I mean, I went to one where they had movies playing in the central station, and all I could think was, if this gets exciting, are they going to ignore a call?
That's a very valid point. Now, we had a lot, back during COVID, a lot of central stations, and you all did allow it, to send their operators home. My question was, what are they watching on TV while the alarm's coming in? Um, I,
So
wo- I worked
it's
at
it.
one central station, and excuse me, I worked on one central station, I was at one central station where they had the Weather Channel playing 24 hours a day. Kind of boring. So I would think they
Mhm.
weren't watching the Weather Channel.
So it seems it's kind of a hot button. You bring up kind of a hot button issue, which is operators working from home.
Mhm.
Now, not everyone does it. Not everyone, I think there are companies that do it and aren't open about it. There's some companies that just say flat out, we don't do it. There's some companies that are open and just say, we do it for some alarms, some type of things. Like, maybe the low priority alarms go out. We do it based on how well the operator is performing. What are your thoughts on operators in the central station versus in their living room?
My preference is to make sure the operators are in the central station.
Well, you talked a lot about redundancy. I mean, you talked about backup generators, backup phone lines, backup, uh, you know, privacy protections, security for the building and the data. How do you do that if someone's sitting on their couch?
I guess the answer would be very carefully, Dave, but that's not a good answer.
Yeah.
The answer is yes. I mean, I'm in my office right now in the house. I have a battery backup or UPS on my computer. My doors are not protected. Um, People could come into my house at any time. I mean, the doors are closed, but there's no protection. I would hope so.
Yeah.
Doors, yeah. But again, I don't know. I've been in the central station business too many years. The operators should be in the central station.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want
I
to make
can,
an assumption about your home, but I would think a multi-million dollar facility would
that's
probably
not
have
my
better
home, by the way.
security than your home.
That's not my home, by the way. Yeah, somebody said I'm working on my second million as I gave up on my first million. But I think the operator should be in the central station where
Okay.
they're controlled, where they're watched, where you can make sure that they're doing the right job at the right time.
Okay. So I want to kind of jump into a couple of questions that we got when we were polling some of the dealers on when they're evaluating a central station.
Mhm.
So, say I'm an alarm.com dealer, say I'm a DMP dealer, say I work with Honeywell. I mean, how important are these integrations? Is it fair to assume that any central station will have them, or do I really need to specifically say, I use this equipment, what can you handle?
Dave, the more questions you can ask your prospective, monitoring center, the better off you'll be. And yes, you have to ask them, are they integrated with alarm.com? Do they handle Honeywell products? NAPCO is another one. How is NAPCO handled, to the central station? The day of the phone line is gone. I shouldn't say that. You still have millions of accounts out there with the phone lines. But today, a
Not a
new
lot of new
installation,
ones, though.
excuse me,
Not a lot
all
of
new
new
ones
ones,
are
though.
radio or
Yeah.
internet. So you want
Mhm.
to make sure that your central station can take internet, transmission. Can they handle the DMP format?
Mhm.
Things like that for sure.
So, I mean, there are also some central stations that will act as resellers for hardware. You might
Uh-huh.
buy radios through them, you might buy in some cases you're buying panels. In some cases there are central stations that have worked out with distributors to give you discounts on equipment.
Right.
Is it a good idea to get that close to your central station, or are you taking a risk by putting all your eggs in one basket?
As long as you're buying equipment that, hypothetically, let's say you, and again, I'm going to pick on Honeywell. Your central station is a reseller of Honeywell equipment, or they send you to a distributor that gives you a discount. Honeywell's available all over.
Mhm.
You can go to ADI, you can go to Triad, you can go to any of the distributors and buy Honeywell equipment, I think. So I wouldn't have a problem with that. I would be concerned if the central station is selling you unique equipment only to that central station. At that particular point, you become, married to that central station.
Well, that's what I mean. In the old days, the question was who owns the phone lines. Now, if you're getting your radio from the central station, do I, if I for whatever reason decide to leave, can I take that customer with me? How hard is that?
Very good question. I mean, I would, again, if you take a look at some of the radio equipment, or again, we'll pick on Honeywell. Honeywell, you can switch from central station to central station. It's a email to Honeywell,
Mhm.
and they handle everything for you. Just make sure you're not buying equipment that is exclusive to that central station and cannot be transferred to another central station.
Okay, that's a fair point. How so? Another question is
Sure.
term commitments. So there are some central stations that will say everything's month to month, year to year, 3 year, 5 year. What's normal? What's a normal commitment?
I work with a lot of different central stations. I would say usually it's 3-year term, but it really is month to month when you really look at it. Or I would say, again, it's 1 to 3 years. I wouldn't go anything more than that for sure.
Okay. What should you be looking for as far as if say you're converting accounts? What kinds of questions should you be asking if you're doing a transfer?
Well, again, the questions that I would ask the dealer first is if you have landline accounts, dial in who owns the phone line. That's the
Okay.
major question to have. But
Okay.
again, if you're dealing with a major central station today, or monitoring center, or call center, there should be a team that they have that will help you make the transfer,
Well,
palatable.
so that right there. So like say I'm dealer, Schwartz security, and I'm
Right.
coming on to, I'm not going to pick on a central station. I choose a central, let's say Rapid. I go to Rapid. I say I'm going to
Okay.
bring a few thousand accounts over. What should I expect in my first 30 days after I sign my paperwork?
Well,
Like
you should.
what should a central
Okay.
station do for
Number one,
me?
again, not to mention, but you picked on a company like Rapid. Number one, they will have a dedicated rep to handle everything that you need. Secondly, they also have a whole dedicated team to make a transfer easy. Again, most central stations will want the paperwork. They'll want to see how many accounts you have, the format you're using. They'll pull the information usually from the other central station, as far as the subscriber, the information, the
Mhm.
transmission, who, what, where, why. They'll go through that, clean it up. You'll be surprised how many, alarm companies think they have 1,000 accounts when they really have 700, because the other ones never transmitted anything to them. So that information's cleaned up. They'll come up with a date for the transfer. You want to make sure that at least when you make a transfer of that size, that you have a dedicated rep at your facility the day of the transfer.
Well,
I
you
mean,
and I both dealt with a client in the last few weeks. I'm not gonna pick on them, but
sure.
they signed with the central station, and the central station, once they had their paperwork in order, basically said, all right, good luck. And now they're stuck saying, well, what do I do now? I mean,
Oh,
what should someone ideally expect as far as onboarding?
well, the onboarding, number one, the salesperson should assist in the onboarding as far as the paperwork, the paper flow, the dealer contract, certification for taxes, certificate of insurance, all these things is the salesperson should make sure that your client has.
Mhm.
The other thing is there should be a dedicated person at the monitoring center that's going to work with your customer or work with you to make sure all the paperwork is done, all the, the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed. There shouldn't be a mixture of saying, hey, okay, thank you for the paperwork. Now it's up to you to send the account in. There has to be conversation. There has to be a warm feeling between the central station and the customer. So
Are
there should
the
be, number one, a dedicated person at the central station. The salesperson should be dedicated to you as a customer to make sure that everything goes smoothly. There should be a third person that the customer or the central state, the dealer can go to. If that's not met, if those three things are not met, he has to have a name and a number who to contact at that central station.
how different from company to company is the dealer experience as far as things like adding accounts, monitoring history, handling client complaints? I mean, a lot of the companies have apps and portals. How different is it from company to company, and what should they
Night
be
and
looking
day.
for?
Night and
I've
day.
seen some that are really easy. I've seen some that, look, if I hadn't been in the alarm industry, I'd have no idea what I was looking at. And I've had dealers come to me and say, contact ID. I don't know how to read contact ID. CS, DMP. I don't know why am I getting raw messages? What am I looking at? And then there's some other companies where they translate the data in a more manageable format, so it's much easier for the dealer and their clients to handle.
These are some of the questions like you brought up at the very beginning, Dave. This is part of the hunt for the central station. I mean, this is some of the questions that you have to ask. Number one, my question first is the prospective dealer. Is he new or is he existing alarm company? An existing alarm company with 2,000 accounts, he should know what contact ID is, what CIA is, and what the DMP
Sure.
is.
But what about
no idea.
Their subscribers don't know what they're looking at.
The subscriber, that's right, does not know what he's looking at. And there has to be a subscriber interface that has to take everything and skin it so that he can understand it. Is it a burglar? Is it I always get a kick, it's a trouble signal. I know what a trouble signal is. You know what a trouble signal is. But Mr. Jones has no idea what a trouble signal is. A low battery, what does that really mean to the subscriber? Nothing. So he's going to go and look at a control panel and figure that's where the low battery is coming from. It could be a window transmitter. It could be a door contact.
I want to tell you a quick story.
Sure.
I had years ago, I got a call from a subscriber. It was a commercial client, and they said, we were just talking about something. And Central Station got a call, Dealer Services got a call from that same commercial account saying, we want to discuss our account. By pure coincidence, I was on the phone with the person with authority from that account. And I said, I don't understand, who's on the other line? Who is this person? And it turned out to be a tenant. So it was a commercial account, it was an apartment building. It turned out to be a tenant calling in, asking questions that they had no right to the answers to.
Correct.
So how does a central station, or how should a central station protect access to their information?
Well, okay, you're talking about two levels. One is the dealer level. The dealer should have multiple levels for his installers, his office staff. Number one, do I want an installer the ability to change a phone line or change a transmission method? I don't think so. Do I want the office person have access to things? So there's different levels of access. That's number one. And as the owner of the company, you have to be very careful who you give access to and what access levels you have. Mainly, the other thing is, how do I delete a customer? We had that with one of your customers.
We had that with one of my clients where they had to let an employee go on a Saturday,
right?
And it was very difficult getting them turned off from the account.
That should never happen. The owner of the company who has the major access level, a level 10, whatever that is, at a 10 out of 10, he should be able to delete that customer, delete his installer instantly. Okay.
We had to move mountains to get that person turned off.
Should never have happened. Should never have happened. As far as the customer goes, the actual, here's a very good question that plagues the industry for years. Do you want your customer, we call them subscribers, do you want that subscriber to be able to change his information? Some dealers say yes, some dealers say no. So when you pick a central station, you should be able to have that discussion with the onboarding team. Mr. Jones has that access, Mrs. Schwartz doesn't have that access. And that's up to
Okay.
you. That's up to you as the owner of the company.
Okay. So I know we're kind of running to the end of our
Yep.
time.
I
I
think
want
we're
to
running.
ask
Yep.
you, I want to ask you what I think is probably, I don't know if I call it the elephant in the room, but I would say one of the more significant questions that comes up, which is looking at an era of, hurricanes and cyber attacks and, somebody drives off the highway and crashes in the side of the building. Is there such a thing as a central station with 100% uptime?
I had a professor in college one time, one of his questions was, if an unstoppable object hits an unmovable wall, what happens? And I always got a kick out of that. And he said, we have 3 months to come up with an answer. Dave, I'll come up with the answer in 2 seconds. Absolutely not. I can't believe any central station in this day and age, especially with everything going internet and Wi-Fi, does not have a problem at any given time.
So looking in view of that, then I guess the question isn't so much, does 100% uptime exist, but it's more, when you have an incident, what do you do about it? How quickly can you recover?
And that, you should ask that when you're searching for your monitoring center, what is your recovery plan? What do you do if? I understand there's 3 generators and 6 paths and 2 antennas on the building. What if?
Mm-hmm.
And you should ask that question. What if?
And the cancer shouldn't be, this guy runs across the building and flips a switch.
Right. And it also shouldn't be is that never happens.
Mm-hmm.
But in case it does, no. It has happened. It's going to happen.
So is that a red flag if the answer is it's never happened?
I would be very leery of that central station. Really.
Nobody bats 100.
I haven't lost a football game on a Monday morning.
Bats 1,000? I don't know. Well, I want to thank you very much. Before we wrap up, are there any other major red flags you think we should be aware of?
Yeah, contracts is one. Make sure that you're covered legally when you switch central stations. Make sure that you don't have to get new contracts with your customers. Make sure that the contract you're signing with your central station has protection. Make sure you're insured, and that's about all I can say for right now.
I want to just kind of repeat something that you said the other day to me, which really stuck with me, which is that we were discussing a client who had a central station issue, and you said that you told the client, keep in mind that your central station talks to your subscribers more than you do.
I learned that from a gentleman almost 40 years ago up in New York, and he came up with the statement, that the central stations talk to your customers more than you do. So remember that when you're looking. Make sure the diction is proper. Make sure you're not taking a central station in hypothetically down south and you're going to monitor in Brooklyn, New York, or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
But again, every time the alarm goes off, they're calling your customer, usually in your name.
And if they're rude to your technicians, they're going to be rude to your subscribers.
Correct. And again, one more thing. Was the central station operator rude? Probably not. But again, you want to hear it. You want to hear how the call went. So remember that they talk to your customers more than you do.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Lew. I really appreciate this. This was great. Let's do this again soon.
Whenever. Give me a call. Very nice
to meet you
this way, Dave.
Talk to you soon.
Take care.